My name's Laura Durham. I'm the Director of Programming and Community Engagement at PBS Utah, and I'm so thrilled you're here for the launch of a new partnership with the Utah Cultural Celebration Center, West Valley City, and PBS Utah called the Shared Stories Series. And this is our first event, and I'm going to tell you when the Celebration Center approached us, they wanted Juneteenth to be the kickoff of this series. And they were so excited, and I thought, who better to kick off Juneteenth with the hosts of Roots, Race, and Culture, Danor, Gerald, and Lonzo Liggins over here. I'm going to have them take the stage in just a moment. First, I want to ask, are there any members of PBS Utah here? All right, let's give them all a round of applause because local media is important, and now more than ever, it's so important. And your support of local media, local journalism, local storytelling means so much to us. And we rely on you to keep our programs on the air. We rely on you so we can do events like this. And so thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I am going to bring Lonzo and Danor up to the stage, the hosts of Roots, Race, and Culture, and I'm going to let them introduce our panelists, and they'll take the stage as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, I usually never record these events, so I'm just doing it for ego purposes, just for fun stuff. So anyway, don't mind me. Go ahead, Danor.
All right. Well, we have some very honored guests that are going to be coming up to speak with us. All of them have been on our show, Roots, Race, and Culture, before and have done a fabulous job, and we invited them to come up. First, we have Robert Burch, who is the head of the Seema Hadithi Foundation.
Next, we have Dr. Sidni Shorte. She's the head of the Utah Black Chamber of Commerce.
And last, we have Dr. Richard Ferguson, who is the founder of Utah Black Physicians Association. We'll invite you all to have a seat. Okay. So, first of all, we've had some thanks, and we also want to show some continued appreciation. Let's thank the Utah Cultural Celebration Center one more time. This partnership with PBS Utah is groundbreaking. It's going to bring so many great opportunities to the city. And we want to also thank James Pies for these excellent pies. If you've never had sweet potato pie before, you now know what you've been missing. Awesome. Okay, well, I want to just ask each of these guests to just give us a quick introduction so that you can get to know them a little better, and they can do it better than we can. So let's start on the far end. Ladies first, and please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's so good to be here with you, and I'm glad to be here to celebrate Juneteenth in this cultural center, and to see a full house today has really touched my heart. And so I'm Dr. Sidni Shorte. I'm the president and CEO of the Utah Black Chamber of Commerce. I consider myself a recovering entrepreneur. And so business, commerce, economic ecosystem, and for those who pursue it, it is just my desire and always my focus to ensure that at the end of the day, that they are healthy, they're vibrant, and they're making money. Yeah. They're making money.
Dr. Ferguson?
Yes, so I'm Dr. Richard Ferguson, President, Founder of Black Physicians of Utah. I'm happy that everyone is here today as well. I see Juneteenth as being something that should be very unifying, given the sort of rumors.
Do you have your mic on?
Oh, is it not? I mean, I thought I pressed it. I thought he turned it on. But do I need to
There
do
we go.
Hello, there we go. Sorry about that.
I was going to say, I heard you.
But yes, I see Juneteenth is something that should be unifying, not only for our nation, but definitely for all Utahns. A little bit about me, I hail from Washington, D.C. I actually exited the military here in Utah after 7 years of active duty service, exited as a brigade surgeon.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you. And finished my training in family medicine, but primarily practice emergency medicine out of state. My day job is I'm the chief medical officer for Health Choice Utah, so it's a Medicaid plan here, and associate CMO for all of university health plans. But what brings me a lot of my passion is BPOU and trying to bring about health equity, and equity to me is a signature part of Juneteenth if we want to do a parallel between emancipation and equity. But health equity by increased representation of black physicians. So that's kind of the impetus and the motivation for why BPOU is here today.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, my name is.
You got to turn it on too.
Yep, I think you're on. It's on? Okay. My name is Robert Burch. I'm the Executive Director and Founder of Sema Aditi African American Heritage and Culture Foundation. We are a history society, and we are the only Black history society in the state of Utah, and that's what we spend 100% of our time doing, researching, preserving, and sharing the stories of African Americans in Utah before there was a Utah. Even before it was the great territory of the Deseret, there were African Americans here. We face some similar things that both Sidni and Richard addressed, and that is the mental and the economic health of black people in Utah. We learned from a study some years ago from the University of Utah that African American families earn about 58 cents for every dollar that white people earn. And what we understood, there was several causes. One was most of these guys like Lonzo and Danor, they do well and they move on to another place. So we was having a hard time retaining black people in Utah, and part of it was that they didn't feel any connection. And so without the stories of black people here from the 1800s, they didn't feel any connection to the place. The other problem that we faced is that many of our children, who, especially biracial children, they prefer to be identified as Latino versus Afro-Latino or as black. So we understood that without these stories to help fortify our children, they lack the confidence, they lack the stability, the strength, the need to even face some of the challenges of living in Utah or living in anywhere else. And so we wanted to address that type of thing at Sema Hadithi, where we can not only support the black community in their emotional and mental health, but also at the same time be able to reach out to the white community and have them understand that the stories, the narrative that you may have become accustomed with or grown into are not necessarily the whole story. And so we're not interested in rewriting Utah's history, but there's volumes and volumes of information about other people that you should know that would possibly change how you view yourself in Utah community.
Awesome, thank you. So,
Hey, let me
go for it.
Yes. I apologize in the midst of in the midst of recording, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Lonzo Liggins. I am the co-host of Roots, Race, and Culture. I just wanted to say, Happy Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Right? It's one of the amazing reasons why we're here today is to talk about the fight for freedom. And there are many things that involve that word. And tonight we have this amazing group of panelists who are really going to flesh that out for us. One of the things that Danor and I always like to do whenever we do any shows on PBS Utah is we like to find interesting people within our community. We like to find people in our community that bring a lot of unique stories, that bring a flair, who dress nice like Dr. Richard Ferguson, who comes in these bad suits, not bad, bad good. I guess young guys would call it fire. One of my kids called me an MPC the other day. Does anybody know what that means? We're all old. We don't, but he knew what it meant.
Non-player character.
Not something character. Anyway, Dr. Sidni Shorte, she has a lot of amazing contributions as well. She's a writer. She's just a person that's full of talent, not just someone that's involved in the business world, even though she says she's a recovering entrepreneur. And Robert over here, he's just a movie star. He's a commercial writer. He does everything. I make stuff up too. Okay, on with the show. Let's go with the show.
Okay, yeah, and as said, I'm Danor Gerald. And so, first of all, what we want to do is to make sure everybody understands Juneteenth. And I'm assuming if you're here that you get it, but I'm also from Texas. I got family in Galveston. I've been celebrating Juneteenth for as long as I can remember. It's a pretty new thing here in Utah as well as in some other parts of the country. So, what is the significance of Juneteenth to you? And I want you to give us the Cliff Notes version of how this came to be, since you're our historian. So give us the 60-second version.
Okay. So I'm going to give you the quick version. That's why I wrote it down, so I don't. Okay. Explanation of Juneteenth. Juneteenth marks the most significant moment in American history, the delayed but powerful fulfillment of the Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation for most enslaved people was not immediate. It was slow and progressive. President Lincoln first introduced the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation on September 22nd, 1862, and the final proclamation went into effect on January 1st, 1861. It wasn't until June 19, 1865, 2.5 years later, that Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas to enforce it. On that day, over 250,000 enslaved African Americans in Texas learned finally that they were free. There was inevitably resistance to the order, as we find that in almost a year following Galveston, the Memphis Race War, also known as the Memphis Massacre, was a series of violent events that occurred from May 1st to May 3rd, 1866 in Memphis, Tennessee. White police officers and white residents attacked black neighbors. But Juneteenth is more than a date. It represents the freedom delayed but not denied. It tells us that even when justice is slow to arrive, it remains a right worth fighting for. The celebration began with black Texans who turned the day into an annual jubilee of family, food, prayer, and remembrance of June 19, 1866, 1 month following the Memphis Massacre. Over time, it became a national call to remember the past and the possibilities of the future. Other black communities in the 1800s, such as those in Salt Lake City, celebrated Emancipation Day in September to commemorate the original announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So now you know what it's all about. And I did not realize, even with my history with it, that we're talking 250,000 people were still enslaved 2 years later. That's like if just yesterday somebody came to the state of Utah and said, hey, the pandemic's over, you guys can come out of your houses. And everybody had been sitting in the house waiting to be set free and had been sitting around. And we all remember that. It wasn't that long ago. Could you imagine having to do that for 2 more years than you really needed to? But we're also talking about generations, right? So what does this day mean to you? How can we make it significant for everyone? There's pushback. I would like to hear from our panel. Anyone, feel free to jump in.
I want to hear from Dr. Shorte.
Dr. Shorte, kick it off.
Yeah, when you think about Juneteenth, what is it about this day that so many people need to know about, number one? And number two, what does this day mean to you?
So I'll start with another caveat about Juneteenth, is that when you read the executive order, it was only for Confederate states. The emancipation was only for those enslaved in Confederate states. So legally, there was still slavery in place after June 19th, 1865. Even when we say it was late, the news was late getting to Texas. So I always like to put that in context. What it means for me, and I will keep my Chamber of Commerce hat on,
Yes.
Because now we are talking about individuals who were enslaved and had specific work to perform. Tomorrow I am free. How do I earn an income? So now the numbers change from enslavement to entrepreneurship. They are now entrepreneurs because much of what they did, they had to create. That's why when we do our research and we look in the patent office, we see that many of those patents during that time, for about the next 50 to 60 years, it belonged to formerly enslaved people.
Wow.
So when you talk about innovation, when you talk about being purposeful and intentional, so that's really what it means for me. So when we talk about America being built on the backs of slaves, then it also was built on those who had to become entrepreneurs immediately. Yeah. Because now I am free to do what and free to go where, free to live how.
Well, wasn't the cotton gin invented by a person who was formerly enslaved, or am I wrong in my history?
You don't want me to go down that list.
It's a long list.
It's a long list. It's a long list.
Right, and I love that you mentioned entrepreneurship, because that's something that we can learn from today. And you talk about something that gives us cause to celebrate. People think this is something weird to be celebrating, but when you look at it in that context, it's a lot of celebration to do, right?
It's a lot of celebration.
Dr. Ferguson, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I looked at it from just personally, I learned about Juneteenth in AP history when I was going to school in DC. Not prior to that. Really wasn't celebrated by my family, even though technically we were south of the Mason-Dixon. My grandmother knew of it, but beyond an advanced placement class, many of us in our general high schools, it wasn't celebrated or even being recognized. So I can even imagine that probably only coming up in an AP class, if you had access to where it's being taught here in a high school, not really being taught in a middle school. So I saw Juneteenth when it was recognized as a federal holiday here. I think the first year it was recognized, I actually went to Maine and did a triathlon actually on Juneteenth, but
okay, that was an accomplishment.
Yeah, so but
probably was the only black person in the triathlon.
I was, but Maine has some of the same struggles as Utah.
Making history.
But when I came back and could be part of my Utah black community, one thing was just really trying to educate and inform. In BPOU, at our core, where we try to bring about equity through education. We want to destigmatize, demystify, anything that deals with science or mental health. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, what better way that all of us Utahns, what we share is we should have freedom of access to a high quality of life, freedom of access, if we can, to affordable insurance or affordable care, and having awareness of conditions that are preventable. Some of the way to do that is through receiving culturally competent care, which is part of the mission of BPOU. So I said, well, why don't I do something that's kind of joins it all together, where I feel that Juneteenth it challenges us to face our past of those vestiges of not just African Americans being oppressed, but oppression by many groups in America over the centuries. So sure. I feel that we can parallel that with how we have to overcome certain scientific dogma, and that needs to be challenged and redone and reworked, and people need to be educated on what's safe to do compared to, say, what was taught 50 years ago. So I want to see this as an opportunity where it's unifying, we're celebrating shared freedoms of Americans, that sometimes there's a question mark for some of that now, when it shouldn't be, but to keep us hopeful, but also to make sure that we're learning from our past and do something that's heart healthy. So BPOU, since I've celebrated it here, has been, we're in our second year of trying to do a little bit of a 5K.
I love it.
That's great. I have a question for anyone here. I want to open this up to the panelists. I believe it was 2021 where Juneteenth became a federal holiday. 2022, or I want to say 2023, it became a state holiday. Why so long? What was the fear about? Why would there be this apprehension to have this day of freedom from slavery be something that we never wanted to really recommend as a nation prior to that?
I think a large part of it is emotional. Just like most things that we do, it's emotional. For a large part of the population, the greater part of the population, there's some shame, embarrassment attached to what forefathers and foremothers did to people for 400 years. And so the perception is that if we admit this happened, then their children has to bear some of that shame and embarrassment. But I've also found that when we avoid those issues, we continue to delay resolving them. And I think that's what has happened in the United States, is that even now we see people who want to say, these stories are not an American story, this is not the story we want to have. And so the danger in that, especially for people of color, is that if you sanitize and falsify my story, then you can use that lack of a true narrative to suggest that there's something wrong with my character. I lack initiative. I'm lazy. I'm uneducated, stupid. All of those things that we create about minority people. Because as Sidni suggests, a lot of inventions were being created by enslaved people out of necessity of getting the work done. So the creativity, the intellect was always there. And so if we allow someone to remove all of the access to resources that was done in slavery, all of the access to resources are removed, and then following slavery, all of the access to resources are removed, and then have that same person turn around and say, I told you they couldn't. Never discussing the fact that we were redlined, lynched, separated, oppressed. When you leave that out of the narrative, you then can turn around and say, see, black folks are just lazy. Yeah, and so there are people who just don't want to have that conversation.
Yeah, and having hard conversations is important. It's important for people once they come of age to a certain point. Like you mentioned, an AP class is where you learn this in history. I think that it's very easy for us as adults to underestimate young minds, to underestimate their ability to understand, to reason, to comprehend emotionally and mentally some of these tough challenges and understanding things. But I believe that by mentoring, nurturing, helping them to work through those things, that you develop those minds so that as you get people like this as adults, you get very educated, very wise people who can be leaders in our community. And that's what I think we're also celebrating, is the opportunity that Juneteenth provided for people to become entrepreneurs, to become doctors, to become educators, to become leaders among their own people and for anyone else that was willing to listen. So,
do you want to cut to some? Do you want to show? We should show some of the clips.
Yeah, I want to get to some clips. So now we understand why we're here, but let's talk about some of these things. So let's cue up the first clip. Now this one is from the Buffalo Soldiers episode. So please, let's play that, and then we'll have a little talk about it.
When we tell our stories, we leave the black stories out. And the Buffalo Soldiers were a perfect example of that.
The Army gave him the only part of the American.
Now let's hear the star of the show.
All right, here we go.
Hey,
not bad.
That's I'll give it a 3.
All right, 3 out of 4. That's not bad at all.
That's the world famous musician that sang that song.
Yes, not me, but Bob Marley.
I was gonna say you. That's the point.
So Buffalo Soldier, if you don't recognize it, that is a very famous song by Bob Marley in which he's singing about our subject today, the Buffalo Soldiers. And he's in fact singing not just about the soldiers in general, but he's actually in that song at one point singing about Utah's Buffalo Soldiers. So let's jump into this. I can't wait to hear about this history and to share it with our audience.
Yeah, let's hear about some of the historical stuff.
Yeah, we've got a photo of them. So can you tell us who these people are, Robert?
Well, those are actually the soldiers that are prepared to go to San Juan Hill, and that's in the Spanish-American War.
These are with the Rough Riders, right? So
yes.
these are the black soldiers that Congress helped establish.
Right.
What time period?
In 1866, when the soldiers were initially created, separate from the white soldiers in the United States.
Okay.
And so those are them preparing to go to San Juan, and we also have a flag from that battle at San Juan up at Fort Douglas.
That's right around the corner. Right now, and now, Fiona, you've been digging deep into this history here.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about the soldiers in general.
So the Buffalo Soldiers, they were the all African American regiment in the United States Army, and they came to Utah, the first in 1886.
Okay.
In the Uinta Basin. And then they came to Salt Lake City 10 years later, 1896.
Okay, so you've got two different groups here. You've got those who are at Fort Duchesne, which is, from what I understand, a cavalry, the 9th Cavalry?
The 9th Cavalry, and they established Fort Duchesne.
So just how many soldiers are we talking about here in Utah, these black cavalry and infantrymen in Salt Lake? How many are we talking about?
By 1896, there were over 600 soldiers in Utah.
That boosted the black population.
Yeah, that changed the demographics dramatically.
Right.
And they, of course, they were here with their families and their kids and stuff too, right?
Yes.
So that's there was even more black people. So now
that might be more black folks than there are today. we might have had a population increase.
We got half of them right here on the side.
Soldiers actually were here in Utah by show of hands. So a good portion of it, but not everyone here. It's crazy that how many people know that the Mormon pioneers came through this valley? So, I mean, it's crazy that we don't have that bit of information about this really important regiment, and that's a big part of his life. We were talking about in the show, Bob Marley's song, Buffalo Soldiers, he mentions in one of the lines, it's trotting through San Juan in the hearts, where he just speaks a little bit. I don't know if he speaks directly about Utah in the song, but...
He's talking about Utah.
Oh, it is trotting through San Juan. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
anyway,
so
Robert, tell us more about the Buffalo Soldiers and what their role was here in the state and how vital they were.
One of the big things is that information is already outdated. History gets changed every time we learn something new. So even with the numbers that Fiona shared and the information that we shared, we know that now as many as 1,100 Buffalo Soldiers served in Utah. So literally 25% of all black soldiers following the Civil War served in Utah.
25% of all the Buffalo soldiers were in Utah?
Were in Utah.
Wow.
Okay, so about 1,100. We had about 800 to 900 up at Fort Douglas, and we had 300 to 400 out at Fort Duchesne. And as Fiona said, the belief was that the Buffalo Soldiers first arrived in the Uinta Basin, but that's not true. The first Buffalo Soldiers to arrive here was the 9th Cavalry in Moab. They helped to map out the city of Moab. So as we do this, we begin to get a better and clearer story of how the black men served in Utah, because there were just so many of them here. Yeah. And what we've been able to accomplish is what we call the Utah Buffalo Soldier Heritage Trail. We was able to work with the Utah State History Preservation Office and the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program to create the first book ever written about the black soldiers following the Civil War in Utah.
Yeah.
The very first book.
Hey, how about that?
And so you will find in this book the work of the Utah Cultural Site Stewardship Program. Don't be dismayed if they show all white folks in it, because that's who works for the SHPO until we get some of African Americans trained in that program. But I was glad to be a part of this because this is a project that Senator Hadithi initiated.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to say one quick thing here. My interpretation of it, when you first started speaking, was that when the Buffalo Soldiers first got here to the Valley, there was some hostility,
Yes.
there was fear, there was unknowing, there was these foreign, guys that are coming in and they were going to cause trouble. They were
armed.
They were going to take the women. They were going to rape. But by the end of their journey here, that wasn't the case.
It's a totally different story, especially, I think mostly that story was very significant at Fort Douglas and at Fort Duchesne. At Fort Douglas, it was the Latter-day Saints seeing this fortification at the top of the hill that the United States government has sent out here. It used to be all white men, and now it's all black men. There's an issue with that. We got 800 black men with guns at the top of the hill.
Right.
And Colonel Alan Allensworth was able to meet with local pastors, the president of the church at the time, and have conversations about those men who are here to serve in the United States government. So that started off as a rough patch for the soldiers, but with time, and as the citizens got to know, and it's always good to know people, because when you get to know them, you begin to see that these people are not who you thought they were. At Fort Duchesne, it was a little bit different. The Native Americans who had given the black soldiers the name Buffalo Soldiers didn't want the black soldiers there because the ORA people had been pushed out of Colorado into Utah. And one of the most famous black warriors from back that time was Jim Beckwith. The Native Americans had given him the name Bloody Arm because he was good at with a tomahawk and killing people. And so they understood the reason they gave the black men the name Buffalo Soldiers, that these was fierce warriors and we don't want them out here. Y'all need to keep them in Colorado. And so there was that fear that black men as soldiers are dealing with, LDS people who already have policies against black people, and then you have people in the Uinta Basin who just simply fear them and don't want them around. But yes, over time that begins to change, especially for Native Americans, because what happens for the Native Americans is now you have black soldiers who are keeping the militias in Colorado out of Utah, who were coming into Utah to attack the Native reservations, and the Buffalo Soldiers was keeping those Colorado militias in Colorado.
Wow. So we're talking about a lot of history here that is a vital part of Utah's development, its security at the time between the pioneers and the native indigenous people who were here, the tribes who were here. So I would like to hear.
Hold on a second. I know you're going to move on to someone else. I just want to drop one quick thing here.
Go ahead.
When you get a chance to read about the Buffalo Soldiers, read about them. A lot of the stuff that's here in this state is contributions from the Buffalo Soldiers. Some of the, I want to say it's the not power lines, the telegraph wires were created by them. And just the name Buffalo Soldiers itself, take a look and figure out where that name actually came from. I was going to ask, and we can talk to you later, but we want to just jump on to the next segment.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We're still talking about this. And he mentioned some of that briefly, but you know, there's a lot of other things. I think there's some canyon roads that were built by Buffalo Soldiers.
Through 9 Mile Canyon, Gate Canyon, maintaining telegraph wires. The infantry, the white infantry, I think it was the 18th, were actually installing the telegraph wire. The Buffalo Soldiers who were maintaining them. And we have to realize that Buffalo Soldiers is like the Delta Force at the time. They're on horseback. And so when you need somebody somewhere fast, you sent the cavalry. And so they didn't tie up those guys' time doing a lot of unnecessary infrastructure, but they still patrolled wagon trains, they patrolled the railroads, they patrolled the canyonlands if people got stuck. They did a lot of that kind of fast-moving rescue kind of stuff throughout Helper, Price, Moab, places like that.
People weren't excited for them to leave. No. There was some pushback.
Yeah, well, and just to kind of clarify that story about the Bob Marley song. So the infantry that fought in the Spanish-American War with Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders, that group, there's a large, most of those people, the Rough Riders, most of them were actually Buffalo Soldiers from Utah, and it's the ones from Fort Douglas, am I right?
Okay, no, so what happened is you have Teddy Roosevelt, he's a United States Senator, he's in Cuba, And he's going to use Cuba as his launching pad to become president.
Okay.
So he has his group of white soldiers called the Rough Riders. What happened is that the Rough Riders go into El Caney, Cuba, and they get surrounded, and the 9th Cavalry of the U.S. Buffalo Soldiers rescue them and take them to San Juan Hill. They escort Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders to San Juan. But once they get to San Juan, 24th Infantry from Salt Lake City is already headed up the hill to take the hill. And so as Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders come in, and then you have the 9th Cavalry from parts of them from Duchesne are also following the 24th up the hill. And so you get a mixed group of soldiers at the top who are white and black, but the banner that is placed on top of San Juan Hill is the one that's up at Fort Douglas Military Museum. They sent it back to Fort Douglas where it came from. And so the Buffalo Soldiers was the first of the units to make it to the top of San Juan Hill and take the hill for America.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yes.
And one of the most well-known songs in the world is about black soldiers from Utah. So,
and Danor's going to sing it again.
No, I won't.
Take it away. Take it away.
You know, I just think that is so amazing and such a huge part of history that Utah should be very proud of.
Yeah.
And I will say this, if you go to the Library of Congress website and you look up a photo of Teddy Roosevelt and those Rough Riders, you'll see him and, 20 or 30 or so white guys, the Rough Riders from Texas. And since they're from Texas, I'll give them some street cred. But if you look at the full photo, it's been cropped. If you look at the rest of the photo, it's all those black Buffalo soldiers. That are on the edges. And so they crop the photo and hide the history, right? But that's Utah history they're hiding. So let's get into a little bit of what do these kind of stories mean to you as an adult, as a parent, as a black person? What about you guys?
You want me to jump in? I'll jump in here. It's all of our stories. And I think that should always be the biggest takeaway. And so as much as we are very colloquial and community and culturally centered, it's still all of our history. And so no matter what nomenclature. So if it were not for those Buffalo Soldiers being there, there would have been no Teddy Roosevelt. Right?
President of the United States. Yeah, he
President of the United States. And so it's all of our history. And though there are parts of it that, and you asked the question early on about Juneteenth becoming a holiday and why did it take so long, it's kind of one word, it's acknowledgement. And it's something that America has just had a challenge with. And so if we make it a holiday, that means we're acknowledging it.
Because you got the day off work.
Well, and the other part is that to me, whether you acknowledge it or not, it's still the history.
Yeah.
Right.
It's still the history.
It's still what it is.
And so as we each carry it, whichever part of that is ours, it's still our story to tell. It's a part of the American fabric. Yeah. It is what makes America what it is. And so as much as we want to tell partial stories or crop the photos,
right.
It's still the history.
Yeah.
It's still the history, whether it's acknowledged or not.
That's true.
Yeah, and it's a value. Oh, go ahead.
So I was going to say one thing that I find that it persists through much of what we're discussing from the Buffalo Soldiers through Juneteenth. There's fighting, but then there's the Army. We got General Granger, we got the Buffalo Soldiers. Being Army veteran, fellow veterans here in the audience, yes. It reminds me that there is fighting occurring for social justice or for justice to occur because an injustice was occurring by the slaves in Texas not knowing that they were free. I think we're still fighting for certain social justice today. Yeah. And so that's how I see a purpose surrounding Juneteenth. But if we're fighting for social justice, we should fight for health equity as well. Yeah. So I try to bring about that same parallel. We should have the same resilience to persist for both.
That brings us to a good reminder. Let's go ahead and let's move to the next clip that we have.
Yeah. according to the Education Advisory Board, now this is after a student has decided to go into STEM and they go into it in high school or college, 1/3 of blacks and Hispanics will change their major out of STEM because they feel like they're being discriminated against. So how have you ever seen or received any pushback from students when you're encouraging them and then they get to college and they're like, no, I don't want to do this anymore? How have you guys experienced or found that?
That's a great question and a great point. So I see it often. And it's many times it's pre-medical advisors that are at college campuses. It's high school, college advisors that are blatantly discouraging black students from pursuing higher, not necessarily higher degrees, but particular arduous or tough fields. And they will say, well, maybe you won't be as great as that. Maybe consider this other tier of school. Not always encouraging them to, shoot for the stars, settle for the moon, or, stay a little closer to earth. Do what you're more capable of. I've seen that from my volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club here at the Capitol West, but also I've seen it at University of Utah campus. There's actually quite a few resources with University of Utah for black students, but many of the advisors will not connect them to these resources that are particularly for STEM opportunities in the summer, working in a research lab, getting an internship with a biotech firm. They are out there. They want to hire black and Hispanic students, but you don't have often professors that are encouraging this behavior.
And providing those connections, that's important.
Was there like a personal experience that you had going to college?
In my case, I studied in Peru, okay? I didn't have any pushback about my race or ethnicity. However, being a woman in STEM, I have, since the first time I study STEM, I have bullying from my male students, my male colleagues, and also many of our students, males, talk about our appearance like a woman, because there were a woman and a lot of men, and it's hard because sometimes they didn't respect you. In your opinion.
That even happened recently in South America with a woman who was in the Congress, and she had someone who basically was inappropriate on the floor of Congress with this woman. So I can see how that would be very damaging to your sense of self-confidence.
Yes, I think so. Women in STEM are very valuable, and in my experience, because I am study an engineer career and see that women are more determined to finish this career than the male.
Wow.
In my experience, okay? Right. Every experience is different, but in my experience, more women, if they decide to pursue a STEM career, they finish.
Oh, good job.
Yeah.
Seeing that clip, and I remember that show very well. We were talking about disparities in healthcare. We're in a political climate. Obviously, we don't want to get all political here, but I mean, as far as public health is concerned, have you seen a lot of changes? And what kind of changes and things are you dealing with right now when it comes to public health? And is it, what can we look forward to looking forward? Like, are there things that we can and can't do to improve those conditions?
Well, I could say I'm looking to a change in the next administration, but before then, I would say I'm a little more concerned than I would be, because there's a lot of things we've taken for granted. We have a vaccine schedule. You will listen to your doctor to get the vaccine schedule. But now there's so much misinformation that's put out faster at times than facts that's leading people to question something that I felt has been dogma and proven and valid and helpful to improve quality of life, longer life, preventing hospitalizations for children, parents losing time from work because your child has a preventable illness. That has me highly concerned, but also affordability, because I don't think some people understand here that what happened a little over a week ago, if you ACEP, so that's the American College of Immunization Practices that is under the CDC and the Health and Human Services Secretary, if they start changing guidelines and guidance on what children and adults should be receiving, insurance follows that. Coverage follows those recommendations. So if they start having recommendations now that come out that question, or that say it's optional or no longer required, then someone's like, well, now I have to come out of pocket to get my child vaccinated. That's a more immediate concern. And we've already seen it with COVID-19, the COVID vaccination no longer being recommended for pregnant women and healthy children, right? So, however, we have ACOG, we have professional societies of docs, family physicians, pediatricians that have signed a testament saying, no, we disagree with this. We're still going to recommend it to our patients, but that might not matter if, the difference will be affordability. I can't pay $100 for a shot. So then you're looking for vouchers, and now you're going to have to find more resources. And then now you're looking for a nonprofit that's maybe going to cover it, but now that nonprofit has gotten their federal funding possibly cut that would have supported it because they were helping marginalized groups. So I'm very concerned in the immediate future because of some of our safety nets are possibly going to be cut and that's really going to have a long-term impact on public health. I mean, there's already concern in southern Utah of measles exposure. It's a matter of time. It's in, I think, 30 states right now. Should not be rampant at all. I mean, the fact that we have to tell people that are coming to the U.S. to make sure you're up to date because the U.S. might make you sick. We are used to being told that when we go somewhere.
Right. You got to get 7 shots to go to Africa.
Yeah, you need 3 now to go to Montana,
Yeah.
Like who wants, did you get, they don't have clean drinking water there because they, cut taxes again.
Right.
So I think we saw how some of the breaks in public health when it came to the pandemic and how we don't need to claw back funding for it. We need to bolster the funding because it is a matter of time. And we can, hopefully have gotten away from putting our head in the sand, but we will have another pandemic. Okay. There's also, I don't know if people know about, I think it's called Nimbus, which is the new COVID variant that causes a really bad sore throat. But remember, it still affects it causes clotting in our body. So it's still increasing one's risk for heart disease that worsens it, stroke. So we still need protections. And why would we not want to support science so that it's accessible for everyone? So that's my fear. But I think we'll have to lean a little bit more into our institutions, University of Utah, Huntsman Cancer Institute, Johns Hopkins, other world-leading institutions that we're probably going to have to lean into them for further advising and supporting them with their research.
Do we see more student interest in particular in some of the minority communities, especially since we've done that episode, that are interested in STEM, which is, for those of you who don't know, STEM is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Do we have does there seem to be an uptick? Does it seem to be the same, or where are we at with that?
I think it's a little bit is BPOU has kind of created a community. As we said, some of the facts is we have transient nature of some of the black community here. So it's hard for us to keep talent. You know this very well. It's hard to sometimes attract. We have a physician here that I was part of trying to attract to come to Utah. Hi, Dr. Sakama, how you doing? She's here.
Welcome.
But almost 2 years to try to get that to happen for one black physician who will make a difference in many of the high-risk pregnancies that we have in our state. And so I would say the BPOU's existence, because people know and we've had a presence for a little while, we have more students that said, oh, I know that if I do go to University of Utah or if I do go to school in Utah, even if I'm way down in St. George, there is a community that can support me through this. There is a scholarship for me. There is someone that can provide a mentor so that I'm not alone in this. Or I know I can see it and I can be it now because I met a black doctor. I was the first black physician that someone met yesterday. And,
wow.
He was born and raised in Utah.
Born and raised, first black doctor.
Yeah.
Were you his doctor or he just
No. But
because sometimes people will turn around if they walk in the door and.
Oh, I get asked a lot. Sorry you can't see me. But right after that, he had a strong interest in public health because of our program that we had last night that was talking about early screening and detection of dementia. So it's really about education, because the thing is, if an educated adult, child, student, that is the best weapon against disease. in prevention is education. And so BPOU drives that home hard regularly. I even have my team here tonight, which are undergrads at University of Utah in the front row here. And they help to push out this information regularly to everyone, also with the support of the Black Chamber. And it's not just information that's going to help the Black community and those that are marginalized. The health of Black folks, that knowledge that I'm imparting helps all Utahns. You know, heart disease is affecting all of us. Right.
Yes.
So hyperlipidemia affects all of us. Diabetes can develop in all of us. So it just happens, this resource just happens to be Black developed, Black owned, and Black led.
Right.
Which is great. And
Yeah.
and you mentioned the Black Chamber of Commerce.
Well, yeah, we want to watch. Let's watch that
Yeah,
clip
yeah, yeah.
if we have some time here, and we'll watch that and hear from Dr.
From
Shorte.
Dr. Shorte and the work that she does, which is amazing as well.
DEI is about accessibility. In order for us to be positively motivated, to be upwardly mobile, we need to have diversity, and in that those diverse individuals should be equitably treated. And equity is not the same thing as equality. I want to make that distinction. So equality says that everybody gets the same thing, but equity says everybody gets the thing that they need in order to succeed. So there's a huge difference
That's
there.
a really big difference when you explain it that way, and I don't think people understand that.
I don't think people understand that, and that's where the pushback comes from.
And I have a question for you. Are there other ways that DEI is important outside of business? Because I know we had spoken about the culture of a company. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so what's really important, we look at the investments that are made by many companies who want to ensure that they have diversity, right? And so, but what happens when that diverse candidate arrives? Right? So it's really taking a serious look at the culture of your organization, because every organization does have a culture. And all cultures are not conducive to diversity. And so as much as you may want it, there is work that's involved, and that's the aspect around the skepticism now, because it's not an add water and mix. I'll go back to our roots of Louisiana. When we talk about gumbo, right? America was built on the premise of a melting pot. That meant that everyone had to conform, assimilate, and become like the majority. Gumbo has different ingredients. And all the ingredients, although they are in the same pot, preserve their unique flavor. And that's what makes it great.
Oh yeah, you get 3 or 4 layers of flavor when you get
And
some gumbo.
the melting pot is very different, right? Because it is all melded into one. But when we all work and simmer together, right? And preserve our own unique flavors, that's what makes it wonderful. That's what makes it beautiful. That's
I like
what makes
that
it work.
analogy. That's beautiful.
Can I share with you guys an article? I wanted to share with you an article that was in the Washington Post. It reads, ex-Morgan Stanley executive alleges reverse discrimination in a lawsuit. He said he was unfairly terminated in the interest of Morgan Stanley's diversity goals. The idea of, and there's in quotes, reverse discrimination gets thrown around a lot by people who are fighting against DEI initiatives.
My response to that is that this idea of reverse discrimination is not new, first of all. We've heard this over and over again in different ways, whether through universities or corporations. But the fact of the matter is, in order to discriminate, you have to have a level of power. Power comes from institutions, and power comes from systems. And if I am not a part of the system, I don't have any power over you.
Dr. Shorte.
All right. Now, time is somewhat limited, but so what I want to do, because I don't want to cut this brilliant doctor off, I want to just give you an open mic and let you cook, sister. So.
You want me to cook that gumbo?
I sure do.
Because I can. But I want to point out, I'm so glad that Nikki Walker and I both were on screen together, because oftentimes people think I'm her and she. So maybe you see the difference with us being together. Here, I will start with this. The fact that we are here on the premise and the back of Juneteenth. History is culturally on our side. History is on our side. And so what that means for me when I look at, from a Chamber of Commerce standpoint, this is truly about economics. What we're, from a medical standpoint, from a historic standpoint, it's still about economics.
Yes.
And it is an economic ecosystem. The work of the Chamber is to ensure that every business has an opportunity to be vital to that economic ecosystem. We are experiencing now, when you try to cut off one part, it impacts the other. Whether it's culturally, whether it's socioeconomically, it is going to impact each of us in some way. And so, to me, our work is truly about making sure that we get to, and I'm just going to say it, it's about the green. If we're going to talk about a color, it is about the green. It is absolutely about the green. And so there are still barriers. There are still challenges. But I will say again, history is on our side. And I use this example. I had the fortunate pleasure of knowing my great-great-grandmother.
Wow.
So to put this into context, when we talk about the history and we try to stretch it so far back and we say, well, just forget about that. Well, I can't forget about her, and she was enslaved. Now, was that something we sat around the table and talked about? However, what's important for me when I look at that is that I have her Bible in my possession. The first entry in that Bible is 1872, when it was illegal for her to read and it was illegal for her to write. And she risked her life to do that. And because she risked her life to do that, I now have that history. Those were our birth records. Those were our marriage licenses. But she risked her life. And so when I think about being a black girl from the South, from Louisiana, understanding that even before 1865, I had ancestors who walked to the north in the dark. Let that sink in. And the reason why they walked in the dark, because they couldn't move in the daytime. So just think about being still all day. As long as the sun is shining, you cannot move. History is on our side. If they could do that and get us here, because we are only here because they did that.
Yes.
Yes.
It is Juneteenth every damn day.
Yes.
Every day.
Wow.
And you know, I want to say something because I think it's very vital, and I'm so glad she said, do you have that mic?
Yeah.
Can you turn that mic on for me? There we go. Okay. I grew up in this community. I say that if you guys come to our events, I'll say this spiel every time, but this is something that really just makes me want to speak out about this, okay, because it's important. I grew up in Sugar House in what's called the Harvard-Yale area. I was the only black kid in my neighborhood. I grew up thinking and being told, based on the fact that I didn't see a lot of media here, especially talking about us or anything that we did, I didn't see any black cops, any black physicians. So I moved to California when I was 19 because I never traveled. My dad was really cheap, so he never paid me. But I moved to California, and I started to see different black folks. What we're doing right now in this room is so important. This event is important. The show is important. And let me tell you why. What do?
I'm a physician.
I know you work for the Chamber of Commerce, but I know you've done other stuff.
Just one thing?
Couple of things.
All of them. I'm a writer, I'm a producer, I've acquired a finance and accounting firm that I took to 100x in 2 years.
Woo!
Food safety compliance, sales management.
Historian. I'm just here to follow him.
I'm going to do this for a couple minutes just because I want y'all to see. What do you do for a living, sir?
I'm a student at the University of Utah.
Perfect. Sorry, I'm just asking the black folks because I'm trying to make a point.
I'm an entrepreneur. Student success coach for HBCUs.
Yes.
Travel professional.
Engineer.
High-risk physician. High-risk pregnancy.
Alice.
Oh, history researcher and former business owner.
I'm a manager of a flooring business.
Of a what?
Flooring business.
Flooring business. Okay. If you don't want to talk, just let me know. Okay. I'm going to do a couple more people, and that's it.
I'm a behavioral health case manager.
I'm a lawyer.
I want you to notice one thing. Not one person said they're a crack dealer. Not one person said they were, doing horrible things in their community. Every single person in that community is vital. They contribute, they pay taxes, and they do amazing things. And it's important that we know that these people exist in our community because it breaks down the stereotypes that we see, we think, and we hear about these people. It's important these stories get told. It's important that we see and understand who these people are in our community, and it's important that we've had them here today, and keep supporting these events because your kids, not just my kids, need to see that these people exist in your community, and they do have a powerful story to tell.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I want to turn some time over to Laura again, and she's going to just let you all know, if you had fun, this happens every month right here, every month.
It sure will. How many of you learned something tonight? Learned something new? If you RSVP'd, I have your email, and you will get an email from me. I'm asking you to fill out a short survey because I want to hear what you learned. I want to hear what we can do better. As Danor said, we're doing events every month. If you enjoyed what these people have to say, I'm going to send you links to Black Physicians of Utah, to Sema Hadithi, to the Black Chamber, to Roots, Race, and Culture. I want you to learn all about that. And in addition to what you do, I hope you can say, and I'm a PBS viewer. Because we make sure everyone is represented on our screen. That's our goal, that's our value. And if you don't see that, we want to hear it from you.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to just take 30 more seconds to queue up 2 clips that you're going to see. If you were really fascinated with the Buffalo Soldiers story, there's a great documentary called Buffalo Soldiers Fighting on Two Fronts that will air 1 week from tonight at 7 p.m. on PBS Utah. I'm going to show you a really short 30-second clip. And then following that, if you have kids or grandkids, we want you to come next month on July 1st to the next Shared Stories event. We have a great PBS Kids show. It doesn't air until September, but you get to see the first episode on July 1st here. It's called Weather Hunters. Speaking of STEM, if you have kids who are interested in science and engineering, this is a great new program from Al Roker Entertainment. You're going to recognize that face and that voice in a cartoon when you see that. So please come back on July 1st. Thank you so much, everyone.
When we tell our stories, we leave the black stories out. And the Buffalo Soldiers were a perfect example of that.
The Army gave him the only part of the American dream that the nation would let him share.
It gave them a sense of respect to wear the uniform of the United States.
We say African American history, but we got to get out of that. It's American history.
Thursday at 7 on PBS Utah.
coming in September to PBS Kids.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Al Hunter, your new meteorologist. We have mostly sunny skies, but it sure is windy out there. Today, we have 3 special guests who are going to help me do my weather report. My kids. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Lily Hunter, and this is Corky and Mrs. Benny, and here's what's happening in our neighborhood. The wind was blowing, but it soon started blowing harder and faster. To know how fast it was blowing, I used this. It's called an anemometer. It tells me how fast the wind was blowing. When it was at this number, this flag looked like this. But when the wind blew faster, and the anemometer measured it with a higher number, just look at that flag now. And there was a strong and fast wind that made the kite fly high.
Thank you all for coming. We celebrate
Wait,
each of
one
you.
more thing. There's a ballerina out here. Where is she? Come on up here. This is come on up here.
Be careful, because he might ask you to dance or something. You never know.
This is she's a professional ballerina at Ballet West. Would you tell us what your name is?
Taylor Fikes.
Sorry, you guys. One
Taylor Fikes.
Do you have a show going on right now?
No, we're out of season for the summer.
Oh,
Season's off. The summer's off season.
But you usually do. Will you be in another show coming up?
We start back usually in August. Is when the season starts, and so the first show will probably be in October.
Cool. Taylor Fikes, ladies and gentlemen.
Black ballerina from Ballet West. Thank you. All right. Well, again, we celebrate each of you for what you all do for our community. It doesn't matter what color you are. We're all in this together. So thank you all.
Thank you.